My name is Marianne Foster. I'm 60 years old. And 3 days ago, my own son tried to murder me. I know that sounds unbelievable, like something you'd only hear in a true crime family betrayal story on the evening news. But this isn't a headline. This is my life. And if you stay with me, you'll see how a family that looked picture perfect from the outside was hiding secrets darker than anyone could imagine. Secrets that ended with a fall from a 300-foot cliff blood on the rocks and a truth buried for 25 years. For most of my life, I thought I had what everyone dreams of: a home in a quiet suburban town, the smell of coffee in the mornings, and the sound of children's laughter filling the rooms. My husband, Edward, was a carpenter whose rough hands could turn plain wood into masterpieces. We had 2 boys, Samuel, our firstborn, the joy of the house, and Victor, 5 years younger, quieter, but still loved with all my heart. On Sundays, we went to church together, then sat down for dinner at the oak table. Edward carved himself. Family was everything, or at least I thought it was. I was the teacher at the local elementary school, known for telling little stories about my students over dinner. Edward would grade papers with me, and later I'd hold boards steady while he sawed them in the shop. 40 years of marriage built on teamwork, loyalty, and love. To our friends and neighbors, we were the example of stability. People would say, if you want to see a real American family, look at the Fosters. But appearances are fragile masks, and behind ours was something waiting to destroy everything. Because what I didn't know then was that my son, Victor, carried something inside him, a coldness, a hunger that would one day turn against us. It's easy to see the signs now looking back, the moments when Samuel laughed with us and Victor stayed silent. The family photos where one son leaned in and the other stared into the distance. But in the moment, I dismissed it. I told myself, he's just shy, he'll grow out of it. A mother's blind hope can be dangerous. Even after Samuel's sudden death at 20, I clung to the illusion of family. The police told us it was an accident, a fall in the dark. We buried him, cried together, and carried on. Edward held me up when my knees buckled at the funeral, whispering, "We'll get through this." I believed him. I had to. But the truth was, the cracks had already formed. Now, all these years later, I realize I was living inside the perfect setup for the ultimate family betrayal. A betrayal, not just of trust, but of blood, of love, of everything sacred. What you're about to hear is not just a survival story. It is a true story of betrayal, revenge, and justice. And I promise you, once you know what really happened on that cliff, you'll never look at your own family the same way again. It began 6 months ago, though in truth, the seeds of it had been planted long before. Edward and I had finally decided to update our will. After decades of working me as a teacher, him as a carpenter, we had managed to save close to $200 through salaries. Add to that the house we built together and the small plot of land my parents left me, and we had something to pass down. It was meant to be a gift of love, a safety net for our children and grandchildren. I thought it would be a moment of family unity. Instead, it became the opening move in a nightmare of family betrayal. Victor was the first to insist we do it. "Mom, Dad, you're both 60 now," he said, with that polite, almost too perfect smile. "It's important to get everything in order." Sophia sat beside him, nodding, stroking my hand with fingers that would later push me toward death. "We love you so much," she said in that soft voice of hers. "We just want to make sure you're protected." Their words should have comforted me. Instead, they left a cold knot in my stomach. At the lawyer's office, Thomas Grant laid out the options: trust funds, equal shares for the grandchildren, or a traditional will. I remember Sophia's green dress that day, how she hugged me a little too tightly after we signed. Victor pressed hard. He wanted himself and Sophia named as sole heirs, claiming they would fairly distribute everything later. Besides, he said when you're older, you'll need us. It's better if we have access to the resources to take care of you properly. His tone carried something I couldn't name then. But now I recognize it. Clearly, entitlement. From that moment, visits from Victor and Sophia changed. They came more often, but not with the warmth of family. They came with suggestions, plans, subtle commands disguised as care. "Mom, you should sell this big old house," Sophia said one afternoon, eyes scanning the furniture as though calculating its worth. "We could help you find a modern apartment, something easier." Victor's face hardened when I objected. "You're being irrational," he said, in a tone he had never used with me before. "This house is too big for two old people. What if you fall down the stairs? What if something happens? I love that house. Every wall, every corner, every creak of the floorboards held 40 years of my life with Edward. The kitchen, where I made thousands of meals. The yard where my children played the shop. Where my husband built dreams from wood. It wasn't just a building. It was us. I couldn't let it go. And yet I saw something in Victor's eyes that chilled me. Not worry, not love, but irritation, even anger. Their pressure escalated. They spoke about life insurance policies, about transferring power of attorney, about planning for emergencies. They smiled as they said it, but their eyes betrayed calculation. It was no longer about family. It was about assets, about control. The illusion of love was slipping, and beneath it was something hungry, something cold. One night, after another tense visit, I turned to Edward. "Doesn't it bother you?" I asked. "Doesn't it seem strange that Victor is suddenly obsessed with our finances?" Edward brushed his teeth, speaking between strokes. "He just cares about us, Marianne. Maybe we should consider his advice. We're not as young as we used to be." But I saw it then, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was hiding something. That same night as we washed dishes together, I pressed him harder. "Edward, do you remember what Victor was like before Samuel died? Doesn't it strike you how different he became?" He froze a plate, dripping suds back into the sink. His eyes locked on mine with a look I had never seen before, haunted, broken. Then he whispered words that shattered my world. "There are things about Samuel's death I never told you." My knees nearly buckled. For 25 years, I had lived with the belief that Samuel's death was a tragic accident, a stumble in the dark. I had mourned my son buried him, wept until there were no tears left. And now, Edward was telling me there was more. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, the same table where our sons once did homework, where we had celebrated birthdays, where Samuel used to make us laugh. With trembling hands, Edward confessed. That night, Marianne Victor wasn't in his room like he said. I followed him. I found him and Samuel at the gorge screaming at each other. Samuel had papers bank statements. He had discovered Victor had been stealing from our savings for months. My breath caught in my throat. They argued about inheritance. Edward continued, his voice breaking. Victor was furious that Samuel, as the oldest, would inherit more. Samuel threatened to tell us everything. And then, Victor shoved him. I felt the ground vanish beneath me. But the police, I told them it was an accident. Edward admitted, tears streaming. Because that's what Victor begged me to say. He was crying, trembling, swearing it was a mistake. I wanted to believe him. God forgive me, but I did. And when I stayed silent, I became his accomplice. The kitchen spun around me. The son I thought had been my second chance after Samuel's death was in fact Samuel's killer. And the husband who had held me up at the funeral had been carrying the truth all along. In that moment, the pieces clicked into place. Victor's obsession with our assets wasn't care. It was continuation. He had killed his brother for money once. Now he and Sophia were circling again, this time with smiles and hugs, waiting for the moment to finish what he started. This wasn't just a will. This wasn't just inheritance planning. This was family betrayal at its darkest, a son turning into a predator, a daughter-in-law sharpening the knife, and a secret buried for a quarter century, finally clawing its way into the light. If you had walked into our house in those weeks after Edward's confession, you would have thought we were the picture of a close-knit American family. Victor and Sophia arrived almost every other day, their arms full of groceries or flowers, their voices honey-sweet. They hugged me, kissed my cheek, called me Mom, with the tenderness of devoted children. To the neighbors who saw them carrying bags into our kitchen, it must have looked like a true story of family devotion. But I knew better. I had just learned the truth. My son had murdered his brother for money, and now he and his wife were weaving a new net around us, smiling while they tightened the strings. Sophia was a master at it. She'd come bustling in with home-baked cookies, setting them on the counter with a bright smile. "You shouldn't be lifting heavy pans anymore. Mom," she'd chirp, "let me take care of dinner tonight." Then she'd glance around the kitchen, as if inspecting every corner, her eyes lingering on the cabinets, the appliances, even the way Edward stacked his tools in the adjoining workshop. Her voice was cheerful, but her gaze was cold, calculating. Victor played his role too. He'd mow the lawn, fix a loose hinge, carry out the trash, all while patting Edward on the back. "Don't worry, Dad," he'd say, "I've got this. You've worked hard your whole life. Let me take care of things now." Anyone else would have seen a loving son stepping up. But to me, every gesture felt rehearsed, every word scripted. It wasn't about helping. It was about rehearsing ownership, moving into a role he believed was already his. And the more I resisted, the sweeter they became. When I refused to talk about selling the house, Sophia wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "I only want what's best for you." Her perfume clung to my clothes long after she left a scent that now made me nauseous. Victor would kiss my forehead, saying, "Don't stress, Mom. You'll see we'll make life easier for you." But behind those words, I could feel the pressure building. The affection was just the mask of a predator. Family dinners once filled with laughter, and Samuel's jokes became stage plays. Sophia would pour Edward a glass of wine, stroke his arm, and say things like, "You need to think about the future, Dad. If anything happens, Victor and I will be here." Her tone was soothing, almost hypnotic. I could see Edward wavering his guilt from the past, making him vulnerable to her manipulation. He wanted to believe his surviving son was finally caring. He wanted to believe Sophia was truly the daughter we never had. But I knew the truth. What I was seeing was family betrayal in its most dangerous form. Even the grandchildren were part of the act. Sophia would bring them over their little backpacks slung over their shoulders, their laughter echoing in the hall. She'd place them on my lap saying, "See how much they love their grandma. You want to be around for them, don't you?" The implication was clear. If I wanted to see my grandchildren, I had to comply, had to stay in line. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in bedtime hugs and crayon drawings. I started to notice the pattern. Every visit had an agenda. They never came just to talk or share a meal. There was always a conversation about finances, about property value, about insurance policies. They'd slip the questions in between spoonfuls of soup and slices of pie. "Mom, how much is the mortgage balance again? Dad, have you checked the appraisal on the land lately?" On the surface, harmless curiosity. But I could hear the undercurrent, every dollar counted, every asset measured, every move rehearsed. At night, after they left, Edward and I would sit in silence, the echoes of their voices still ringing in the house. Sometimes he'd say, "Maybe they just care too much." Other times, he'd look at me with haunted eyes, as if begging me to forgive him for the secret he had carried all these years. I could see the war inside him. Part of him wanted to believe in Victor's affection, to wash away the guilt of Samuel's death. But deep down, he knew the truth. This wasn't love. It was leverage. The worst moments were when Sophia tried to imitate what Samuel used to do. She'd lean across the table, take my hand, and say, "You're the heart of this family, Marianne. We just want to protect you." I almost screamed. Samuel had said those words once years ago in his bright, genuine voice. Coming from Sophia's lips, they felt like poison. Every gesture of kindness became a weapon. Every hug, every smile, every "I love you" was sharpened into a blade meant to cut away our independence. And the terrifying part was how convincing they were. To outsiders, this looked like the perfect American family. Neighbors even praised us. "You're lucky to have a son and daughter-in-law so devoted." If only they knew the truth, that behind the casseroles and photo smiles was a plot to strip us of everything, just as Victor had stripped me of Samuel 25 years ago. The more they smiled, the more I understood the affection was a lie, a mask covering the monster. And every day that passed, the mask slipped just a little further, revealing the hunger underneath. This wasn't devotion. This wasn't care. This was inheritance drama in the cruelest sense. This was a son and his wife rehearsing the roles of caregivers while writing our deaths into their script. And as I sat in the quiet after their visits, one truth gnawed at me: if they could pretend to love us this well, how far would they go to finish the story they had started? Some nights when the house was quiet, and the echoes of Victor and Sophia's false sweetness had faded, I would sit alone on the porch and let my memories of Samuel wash over me. The way his laughter filled every room. The way he helped Edward in the workshop covered in sawdust, but grinning like a boy who knew the future was wide open. He was our firstborn, our bright flame. He wanted to study engineering, build something lasting, and always promised that when we were older, he would take care of us. He used to say, "Don't worry, Mom, you'll never be alone." And yet for 25 years, I had been living without him, believing his death was an accident, when in truth, it was family betrayal in its darkest form. When Edward confessed what really happened that night at the gorge, it shattered me. For years, I had told myself Victor had simply been the quieter child, the one who needed more love, more patience. I had believed that after Samuel's death, Victor became more caring because grief had matured him. But no, it was guilt he was hiding, guilt that Edward had helped him bury. I remember sitting at the kitchen table staring at Edward as he admitted it. His voice was broken, his eyes wet with tears he had never shed at Samuel's funeral. I saw it, Marianne. I saw Victor push him. Samuel had the proof of the money Victor stole, and they fought. And then Samuel fell. My hand shook as I held onto the edge of the table. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell the police?" My voice cracked with rage and grief. Edward lowered his head into his hands. Because he was our son. Because he was crying and begging me to believe it was an accident. And because I thought I could save what was left of our family. Those words sliced through me. Save what was left of our family by sacrificing the truth, by letting Samuel's memory rot in silence while we pretended Victor had simply changed after his brother's death. My husband had been my partner for 40 years. The man who built me furniture, who brought me wildflowers, who held me through every storm. And yet he had also been carrying this secret, like a stone, around his neck, letting me live a lie. In the days that followed, I felt torn in two. Half of me wanted to scream, to hate Edward for his weakness, for choosing silence over justice. The other half saw the man who had lived with crushing guilt for decades, a man who had convinced himself that protecting one son, no matter how broken, was better than losing both. It was the cruelest form of inheritance drama. One son, dead the other a murderer, and the parents left to shoulder the unbearable cost of silence. I began to notice how Edward carried his guilt in small ways. He lingered longer in Samuel's old room, running his fingers over the dusty desk. He paused in the workshop where Samuel used to hand him nails, staring at the tools as if they could rewind time. Sometimes at night he whispered in his sleep, "I'm sorry, Samuel. I'm sorry." But his guilt didn't erase my pain. I thought about all the years I'd spent blaming myself, wondering if I had missed something, if I could have stopped Samuel from going out that night, if I could have protected him. To know now that Edward had known the truth all along was almost too much to bear. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange across the sky, I asked him the question that had been burning inside me. "Edward, do you ever wonder what Samuel would think if he knew that you let his killer sit at our table for 25 years, that you let me love a lie?" Edward's face crumpled. Every day, he whispered, "I thought I was protecting us, but all I did was destroy us slowly." I wept then, not just for Samuel, but for the decades stolen from his memory, for the birthdays, uncelebrated, the grandchildren he never met, the dreams he never lived. I wept for Edward's brokenness and for my own blindness. The weight of truth pressed down on us both. We lived in a haunted house, not by ghosts, but by silence. Every family photograph on the wall was a reminder. Samuel smiling, Victor looking away, Edward standing stiff me, clutching onto an illusion. Inside me, a battle raged. How could I reconcile the love of a mother with the knowledge that my living son was also my dead son's murderer? How could I forgive Edward for chaining us all to a lie? And how could I ever sit across the table from Victor and Sophia, knowing what lay beneath their smiles? This was no longer just a true story of family betrayal. This was the unraveling of my very identity as a mother, a wife, a woman who thought love could conquer anything. And as I sat in that torment, one thought grew louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. Silence had already killed one son. If we stayed silent again, it would kill us too. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening, just as Edward and I were finishing dinner. Victor's voice floated through the receiver, smooth and cheerful, but to me, it sounded like poison. "Mom, Dad," he said, "Sophia and I were thinking it would be beautiful to celebrate your 40th wedding anniversary with something special. How about a hike this weekend? You've always talked about seeing the mountains." At first, the words didn't register. A hike, an anniversary surprise. But then I saw Edward's face across the table, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide with the same terror rising in my chest. We didn't need to say it aloud, we both knew. This wasn't a gift, it was an invitation to our execution. I forced my voice to sound calm, trembling, as I answered. "That's sweet, Victor. Let us think about it and call you tomorrow." He chuckled. "Of course, Mom. You'll love it. We'll take beautiful photos, a family memory to treasure." The irony nearly made me choke. After hanging up, silence hung in the room like a noose. Edward finally whispered, "The mountains. He's going to take us to the mountains to kill us and make it look like an accident." I nodded, unable to stop shaking. Family betrayal had already stolen one son from us 25 years ago. Now it was coming for us, too. That night, neither of us slept. We lay side by side, whispering in the dark. Edward's voice was hoarse. "We can't just wait. We have to prepare. If we die, at least the truth can live." He pulled out his phone, showing me how he could set the recording app to run silently in his pocket. If we catch even one sentence, it could be enough. The next day, Edward sat at his desk and wrote a letter to my sister Margaret. His hands trembled, but his words were steady the truth about Samuel's death, about Victor's theft, about our fear that we were next. He sealed it in an envelope and hid it among our important documents. If we don't come back, he told me Margaret will know where to look. Meanwhile, Sophia played her role with terrifying perfection. She arrived that afternoon carrying a shopping bag, smiling so brightly it hurt my eyes. Supplies for our mountain adventure, she announced, pulling out cookies, bottled water, fresh fruit. She looked like a daughter-in-law planning a picnic, but I could see the calculation behind every move. "And look," she added, holding up a shiny new camera. "I want to capture every moment. These will be photos we'll treasure forever." My stomach turned. The only photo she wanted was of our broken bodies at the bottom of a gorge. Victor followed behind her, a brand new hiking backpack slung over his shoulder. He unzipped it to show Edward. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, first aid kit. Everything we need for a safe hike. He smiled too wide, his teeth clenched like a predator bearing fangs. I glanced inside the bag and saw something that looked like a flare gun. "What's that for?" I asked. Without hesitation, he replied, "Safety, of course. If we get lost, we can signal for help." The way he said it chilled me. He wasn't planning to signal for help after saving us. He was planning to signal after making sure we couldn't be saved. Edward and I played along, nodding, smiling, pretending to be grateful. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed. I knew now we were living inside a script, a revenge story written by our own son and his wife, dressed up as a family outing. At night, Edward checked the phone again, practicing how to start the recording unnoticed. I packed a small cross from our church in my pocket, praying it would give me strength. I even found myself walking through Samuel's old room, touching the dusty desk where he used to study, whispering, "Help us, my boy. Don't let him win again." By Friday, the tension was unbearable. Edward reviewed the will one last time, making sure Victor wouldn't automatically inherit if we died. "If something happens," he said, handing me a second sealed envelope, "this one explains everything. The police will know." His face was pale, lined with guilt and determination. On Saturday morning, Victor pulled into our driveway, whistling a cheerful tune. Sophia followed radiant, as if it were her wedding day. "Morning lovebirds," Victor called. "Ready for your big adventure." My blood ran cold. During breakfast, Sophia spread out a trail map on the table. "It's a gorgeous path," she said. "Only a couple of miles, but the view at the lookout is breathtaking." Edward and I exchanged a glance. We both knew the lookout wasn't chosen for the view. It was chosen for its drop, a cliff fall of nearly 300 feet, perfect for staging an accident. We ate in silence, forcing food past throats that could barely swallow. Every laugh from Sophia sounded like nails on glass. Every affectionate pat from Victor felt like a countdown. That afternoon, as I laced up my shoes, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A woman who had believed in family for 60 years, now preparing to die at the hands of her own son. My chest tightened, but then I remembered Edward's words. If we survive, we'll have proof. If we don't, at least the truth won't die with us. So I took a deep breath, slipped the cross into my pocket, and walked out the door. We were going to the mountains, not for a hike, not for an anniversary celebration, but for the most dangerous act of our lives, pretending to trust our son while secretly gathering the evidence that might save us. The trail wound higher and higher, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. Sophia skipped ahead with her new camera, stopping every few minutes to snap photos of flowers, birds, and the two of us trudging behind. Victor lingered at the rear, his eyes burning into our backs. The act was flawless, a cheerful anniversary hike, a family outing captured in pictures. But Edward's phone was already recording in his pocket, and both of us knew the truth. After nearly 2 hours, Sophia suddenly pointed. "Look at that cliff," she cried, her voice bright with excitement. "The view must be incredible up there. Let's climb for some photos." My blood turned to ice. Ahead rose a rock formation, jagged and dangerous, standing nearly 300 feet above the valley floor. The drop was sheer unforgiving. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to sound casual. "It looks dangerous for people our age." Victor was already moving toward the turnoff. "Come on, Mom," he coaxed, his smile sharp. "It'll only take a minute. You'll thank us later when you see the pictures." Edward squeezed my hand, his eyes telling me what his lips couldn't. "We need the evidence. We need to go all the way." The climb was brutal. Loose rocks shifted beneath our feet, and more than once I nearly slipped. When we finally reached the top, the view was breathtaking, the valley stretching out below the river, glinting in the sun. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful, but all I could see was the abyss yawning at our backs. "Stand here close to the edge," Sophia directed, positioning us like actors on a stage. "The valley will be in the background. Hug each other and smile." Edward and I obeyed, wrapping our arms around each other. I could feel his heart pounding against my chest. The shutter clicked again and again. Each flash felt like a countdown to death. Then Victor stepped closer. "Take one more," he suggested, his voice low. "But step back a little so the landscape looks better." One step back meant nothing beneath our feet, but air. We hesitated, and that hesitation peeled away the mask. Sophia lowered the camera slightly, her eyes gleaming. "Smile," she said, her voice stripped of sweetness. "This is going to be your last photo?" Victor lunged. For a split-second time, froze, his arms outstretched, our bodies teetering at the edge. But Edward had been waiting. With a surge of strength I didn't know he still had, he grabbed Victor's wrist and yanked. "If we're going to die," he roared, "you're coming with us." The world tilted. Sophia screamed, rushing to pull Victor back. But the weight of all of us was too much. The ground gave way, and suddenly we were falling. Air screamed past my ears, the sky spun, and the valley rushed up to meet us. I thought of Samuel, of how he must have felt when his brother sent him to his death. Then came the impact, bones cracking, pain exploding, blood filling my mouth. I should have been dead, but Edward's voice cut through the agony. "Marianne, don't move." "Play dead?" His command was clear, desperate. With every ounce of willpower, I stilled myself, even as pain seared through my body. A few feet away, I heard groans. Victor and Sophia had survived too, though badly injured. "Are you okay?" Victor rasped. "I think my leg is broken," Sophia moaned. "But what about the old people?" Her words were full of contempt, as if Edward and I had never been family-only obstacles. Victor crawled toward us. My heart thundered so loudly, I feared he'd hear it. After a long pause, he said, "They're dead." Eyes open, no breathing. Relief mingled with terror. He believed us gone. Perfect. Sophia whispered, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "It worked, just like we planned. At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore." Every word was captured by Edward's phone. Hours blurred into minutes. They argued about the story, they'd tell an accident, a tragic fall during an anniversary hike. Their voices grew fainter as they crawled off to find help. When rescue teams finally arrived, Edward and I were still breathing, shallowly pretending. Paramedics lifted us, whispering about faint pulses, critical conditions. We were carried to the hospital, shielded under the guise of death. But the climax wasn't over. In the sterile white of the hospital room, Victor leaned over my bed, his voice a venomous whisper. "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. Some truths are better left buried, just like Samuel." Those words, so careless, so cruel, were overheard by Nurse Amelia Carter, who stood frozen by the monitoring machines. Her eyes widened in horror. She had just witnessed the heart of a family betrayal true story, a son confessing to fratricide and attempted parricide in the same breath. When she leaned down to check my pulse, I moved my finger ever so slightly, signaling that I was alive and understood. Her gasp was soft, but her resolve was firm. She would tell the doctors, the police. The mask had finally fallen. Victor's own arrogance had sealed his fate. The truth was out-recorded on Edward's phone, witnessed by a nurse, confessed in his own words. For 25 years, silence had protected him. But now, silence had become our weapon. By pretending to be dead, we had finally brought the truth to life. When I opened my eyes in the hospital the next morning, 2 police officers stood at the foot of my bed. Nurse Amelia was beside them, her hands clasped tightly, as if still shaken by what she had overheard. Edward sat in a wheelchair nearby, pale but alive. The room was heavy with silence until Detective Robert Hayes finally spoke. "Mrs. Foster, Mr. Foster, you're safe now, and we need to talk." It was Amelia who had called him after hearing Victor's whispered confession. Then came Edward's phone. The recording survived the fall, capturing every damning word from Victor and Sophia about our last photo, about the plan, about Samuel. For 25 years, the truth had been buried. Now it was laid bare in digital clarity. Within 24 hours, Victor and Sophia were arrested. They had limped into the ranger station after the accident, feigning grief, telling the story of how their parents had tragically slipped off the cliff. But when the detectives confronted them with the recording, the mask shattered. Sophia broke first. Her sweet demeanor evaporated as she screamed at Victor. "You said no one would ever know. You promised this would work." He snapped back. "You're the one who wanted the money faster. Don't blame me." Their argument, overheard by the officers, only added fuel to the fire. As investigators dug deeper, the picture became even darker. Bank records revealed that Victor had drained more than $50,000 from our savings over the past 5 years through forged checks. Credit card statements showed crushing gambling debts. Insurance paperwork bore his signature filed without our knowledge, inflating policies that would have paid out hundreds of thousands if Edward and I had died accidentally. It was no longer just suspicion, it was a mountain of evidence of greed, fraud, and attempted murder. The trial began 6 months later. The courthouse was packed. Neighbors, journalists, even strangers who had read about the case and wanted to see the family betrayal true story unfold. I sat in the front row with Edward, my hands trembling as I clutched a photograph of Samuel. For the first time in decades, his name was being spoken in court, not as an accident, but as a victim of murder. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically, the forged documents, the financial motive, the secret debts. He played the recording for the jury, Victor's voice coaxing us to the edge. Sophia's chilling words, "Smile. This is going to be your last photo." The jury flinched. Then came the confession, in the hospital corroborated by Nurse Amelia's testimony. Finally, Edward took the stand. His voice cracked, as he admitted the truth he had hidden for 25 years, that he had seen Victor push Samuel, that he had lied to protect his son, and that his silence had nearly cost us our lives. There wasn't a sound in the courtroom as Edward finished. Some jurors wiped their eyes. For me, it was like exhaling after holding my breath for decades. Samuel was finally seen, finally heard, finally vindicated. The defense tried to paint it differently. Victor's lawyer claimed it had been an accident, that Edward's memory was unreliable after so many years, that the recording was taken out of context. Sophia's attorney argued she had been manipulated by her husband, that she was a victim too. But under cross-examination, their stories collapsed. The jury saw through the lies. I'll never forget the moment the verdict was read. We, the jury, find the defendant, Victor Foster, guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Sophia Foster, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. My chest heaved. Edward's hand gripped mine so tightly it hurt. Tears streamed down my face as the judge pronounced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, not revenge, not closure, but justice, had finally come. Victor and Sophia reacted just as you might imagine. Victor's face twisted in fury, shouting, "You betrayed me, Dad. You were supposed to protect me." His words echoed through the chamber, a grotesque inversion of the truth. Sophia collapsed in her chair, sobbing, then turned on him with venom. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't killed Samuel, none of this would have happened." Their betrayal of each other was almost poetic. Together, they had destroyed a family. And now together, they would rot behind bars. As guards led them away, I felt no triumph, no glee, just a deep, aching sorrow. A son gone, another condemned. A daughter-in-law who could have been family, now revealed as a predator. A family tree split down the middle, one branch cut away forever. This was not the ending I had once dreamed of for my golden years, but it was the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only thing worth holding on to. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around. "Mrs. Foster, how do you feel now that justice has been served?" one asked. I held up Samuel's photo. My voice shook, but I spoke clearly. Justice isn't about winning. It's about telling the truth, no matter how long it takes. My son Samuel deserved this truth, and Edward and I are still alive to speak it. In that moment, with cameras flashing and strangers watching, I felt the weight of silence finally lift. For 25 years, Victor's crime had been hidden, festering in the dark. Now, the world knew. And though the scars would never heal completely, justice had finally spoken louder than betrayal. After the trial ended and the courthouse emptied, I thought silence would finally return to my life. But silence after betrayal is not peace, it is emptiness. Samuel was gone, buried decades ago. Victor and Sophia were locked away, condemned to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Edward and I were still breathing, but our family tree looked like a storm had torn through it, snapping branches and leaving only broken pieces. And then one quiet morning, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, 2 pairs of eyes looked up at me, Victor and Sophia's children, our grandchildren. Behind them stood a social worker explaining that with both parents, incarcerated custody would need to be determined. My heart clenched. The children were innocent. They had no part in this family betrayal true story, and yet they were its deepest casualties. Edward and I didn't hesitate. "They're our family," I said firmly. "They belong with us." The first weeks were the hardest. The children cried themselves to sleep at night, whispering for their mother. They asked when their father was coming home. I held them close, stroking their hair, my own tears soaking into their pillows. How could I explain to them that the people they loved most had tried to kill us, that the bedtime hugs and family dinners had been masks hiding something monstrous? Instead, I told them stories. I told them about Samuel, their uncle they never met. I painted pictures of his kindness, his laughter, his dreams. Your Uncle Samuel loved to help people, I whispered. He believed family meant protecting each other, not hurting. He would have adored you both. In Samuel's memory, I tried to give them a model of love untainted by greed. Edward, too, found his redemption in those children. For 25 years, he had carried the weight of silence, the guilt of protecting a son who didn't deserve protection. Now, he poured himself into caring for his grandchildren, as if each moment was a chance to balance the scales. He taught them how to sand wood in the workshop, the same way he had once taught Samuel. He built them birdhouses, toy chests, even a swing in the backyard. I watched him sweat dripping down his brow, his eyes soft, in a way I hadn't seen in years. It was as if he had finally found a way to atone. There were setbacks. One day, the older child asked Grandma, "Why can't we see Mom and Dad?" My throat tightened. Before I could answer, Edward knelt down, his voice steady but gentle. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love. But you are safe here, and we will never stop loving you. It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough for now. The children needed safety, not scars. Slowly, the house began to feel alive again. Laughter returned, not the hollow kind Victor and Sophia had faked, but genuine, unguarded laughter. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. The garden bloomed as small hands helped me water the plants. On Sundays, we went to church together, the children's voices ringing out in hymns, filling the pews with a hope I thought I had lost. Neighbors noticed. They stopped by with casseroles, with toys, with words of encouragement. "You've been through so much," Marianne once said softly. "But look at you. You're building something beautiful again." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Sometimes, late at night, I sat on the porch with Edward, listening to the children's soft snores through the open window. "Do you think Samuel would be proud of us?" I asked once. Edward's eyes glistened as he nodded. "He'd be proud of you. You never stopped fighting for the truth." I reached for his hand. "And you finally told it." That was our reconciliation. Not with Victor, who had chosen darkness, nor with Sophia, whose sweetness had been a lie, but with ourselves and with Samuel's memory. By raising the grandchildren in love, we could give them a different inheritance. Not money, not property, but something stronger, safety, truth, and unconditional care. I realized then that reconciliation doesn't always mean forgiving those who hurt you. Sometimes it means choosing to love what they left behind, refusing to let their betrayal define the next generation. This was the only way forward. This was the only way to heal. And as I tucked my grandchildren into bed each night, whispering prayers over their small heads, I knew that in giving them this new home, Edward and I were finally writing the ending. Samuel deserved not revenge, but justice, healing, and the inheritance of love. When I close my eyes, I still see Samuel. I see him as a boy running through the yard, his hair catching the sunlight, his laughter so bright it could chase away any shadow. I see him as a young man, standing tall with dreams bigger than himself, always promising Mom, "You'll never be alone. I'll take care of you." That promise was stolen the night his brother pushed him into the dark, but his spirit never left me. Every time I hold my grandchildren close, every time I teach them kindness over cruelty, I feel Samuel's presence guiding me. For too long, I believed that blood alone defined family, that no matter what, a mother must protect her son. But the truth carved its way into my heart. Blood is not always family. Choices are. Actions are. Love is. Victor shared my blood, but he destroyed our trust. Samuel shared my blood, but he also shared his heart, his laughter, his loyalty. And even though he's gone, he will always be my family. Edward and I lost so much, but we gained something too. The knowledge that silence is deadly and truth is liberating. We may have been scarred by betrayal, but we were saved by justice. And in the end, it wasn't revenge that healed us. It was the courage to speak the truth and the willingness to protect the innocent who came after. If there's one message I want you to carry from my story, it's this: family is not defined by blood, but by love and truth. And justice is the only foundation strong enough to rebuild after betrayal. I know many of you watching have faced your own heartbreaks, your own betrayals. Maybe not as dramatic as mine, but wounds all the same. Let this story remind you, you are not powerless. Truth matters. Justice matters. And love, real love, is still possible. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that changed your view of family forever? Share it in the comments. I read every word, and your stories matter. Don't let them stay in silence. And if this story touched you, save this video so you can return to its message when you need strength. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories of family betrayal and justice, because together we can remind the world the truth always deserves a voice. And remember, blood may betray you, but truth never will.